today's Top Boxing News.
Okay, and now it's time for us to discuss how this weekend's contests have so affected the men's and women's ring IQ pound-for-pound list. We're going to start off with Katie Taylor's fight against Cristina Linardatou. In defeating Cristina Linardatou, Katie Taylor has effectively become a two-division champion, and that makes for the fifth world title she has won from an actual world titleist, an actual world champion. Cristina is the fifth world champion that Katie Taylor has unseated, and in doing so, that gives Katie Taylor the precedence to advance to the number 2 spot on the ring IQ pound-for-pound list. It being that, Clarissa Shields, who was seated at number 2, her fight with Ivana Habazin, that fell through. That was a fight that would have made Clarissa Shields, provided that she won it, that would have been a fight that made Clarissa a 3-division champion, a 3-division unified champion, as there was more than one world title on the line, or there would have been. But we know what happened. We know that all of that fell through due to the melee at the weigh-in, resulting in a cancellation of the event, of the fight. As it stands here today, Clarissa has only been a champion in 2 weight classes. Comparatively, both Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields, they've been champions in 2 weight classes. They've both been undisputed, but the difference being, the tiebreaker, as it were, is that Katie Taylor's beaten more active, reigning world champions. That every single belt that she's ever held was a belt that she had to beat a champion to procure. She beat a champion to be a champion for every single belt that she's in possession of. Whereas in the case of Clarissa Shields, yeah, she's been a champion in 2 weight classes, but she's only actually beaten 2 world champions in those 2 weight classes, Nikki Adler and Christina Hammer. The only argument that could have been made for Clarissa to maintain that number 2 spot would have been had she fought Ivana Habazin, beat her, and became a world champion in a 3rd weight class. That would have made her a 3-division champion to Katie's 2. But as it stands, that fight fell through due to the melee at the weigh-in. Thus, as it stands here today, they've both been champions in the same number of weight classes, but Katie had to beat more champions to do it. Whereas a good number of the world titles that Clarissa Shields won in those 2 weight classes, a good number of them were vacant. Nobody was holding them. Thus, in her procuring them, she didn't actually beat a champion to be a champion, at least not for all those different belts. She only actually won 1 belt from Christina Hammer, because that's all Christina Hammer was in possession of.
WBO.
And we've talked about this many times on the channel. But I'll tell you, one might hear this and feel so inclined to ask, well, what's the difference between beating a contender and beating a champion? I mean, why is there so much emphasis on this? Well, this denotes Ring IQ's criteria for the pound-for-pound list. Quality of competition. In facing a world champion, you're effectively facing one of the best and brightest fighters at the weight, as opposed to a contender. These prospects, all these up-and-coming fighters, they go from prospects to contenders and ultimately champions, not the other way around. Thus, defeating a champion means more than defeating a contender. A contender aspires to be a champion, not the other way around. And Katie Taylor has effectively beaten more world champions than Clarissa Shields has, giving her the precedence to sit in the number 2 spot. Many times when these 2 fighters are compared with each other, their career accomplishments and where they are today, you'll hear a lot of Clarissa Shields supporters say that she doesn't languish the way that Taylor does, that at times Katie Taylor, she does look a lot more human in her fights than Clarissa does. But maybe it's because Taylor is going through a proverbial gauntlet of world titleists as opposed to Clarissa, who, many of the belts that she won were vacant titles through no fault of her own. She can only fight who's there, and she can only fight who's willing, but better still, we can only rank them for the fights that they actually have against what fighters they're fighting. And it just so happens that, Taylor, sometimes she looks more human, but she's fighting a better quality of competition. Fighting Hannah Rankin for a vacant title isn't the same thing as fighting Delphine Persoon in defense of hers. Delphine Persoon was the longest reigning champion in the lightweight division, and the most dangerous. So you're gonna languish a bit more with a Persoon than you would fighting Rankin for a vacant title. And that dispels the illusion that those fan-driven anecdotes create, that you never really see Shields languish. Well, Shields isn't fighting the same quality of competition that Katie Taylor is. Now, the upside of it, the silver lining, is that Clarissa Shields is very likely to continue her campaign as a junior middleweight, even though she hasn't actually had a fight there. It's conceivable that that's where her next fight will be, and that division actually has those kinds of challenges, those kinds of champions to offer, right now. A unification match between the WBO champion Hannah Gabriels and the IBF champion Marie-Eve Dicker. A unification match is being orchestrated. It is in the works. Very soon, both those fighters are going to be fighting on the same card in defense of their world titles, respectively, to set the stage for what will be a unification match between them. And it's highly probable that Clarissa's going to challenge the winner of that fight, because the winner of that fight will be the only unified champion in the junior middleweight division. Collecting such a scalp could very well catapult Clarissa back to that number 2 spot. But as it stands right now, she's only been a champion in 2 divisions, same as Katie Taylor. Difference being that Katie had to beat more world champions to do it. Just in regards to that fight, what could be Gabriels versus Dicker, well, the winner of that fight will be a shoo-in to land what could be a number 10 spot on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. Not simply for becoming a unified champion, because then that would raise the question, well, Franchon Cruz is a unified champion, why isn't she on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list? I'm sure some people might be thinking that to themselves. And the difference between Franchon and the winner of that fight is that every world title that Franchon has collected so far has been a vacant title. She won the vacant WBC, contending against Maricela Cornejo, who was not the champion at the time, and she subsequently went on to fight her again for yet another vacant title. Now, this is through no fault of her own. Nobody's blaming her. This isn't me chastising Franchon, who still is the most dominant force in the super middleweight division. She is, because she's in possession of 2 world titles, no matter how you slice it. But better still, the difference is that every world title Franchon won, she didn't actually have to beat a champion to procure. Whereas in the case of Marie-Eve Dicker, she's already beat the long-reigning IBF champion, Chris Namis. If she beats Hannah Gabriels, that would be 2 more world champions to Franchon's 0. In the case of Hannah Gabriels, Hannah's been a champion longer than Franchon and longer than Marie. Thus, if it's Hannah who emerges the victor in that Dicker fight, well, she'll have a stronger argument than Franchon to be ranked at least at number 10 on the Women's Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. Now, the winner of this fight will be there for Clarissa Shields to challenge, and if she challenges them and a fight gets made and Clarissa emerges the victor, she may very well be catapulted back to that number 2 spot. But for now, these are the rank standings. We turn our attention over to the men's Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. There is going to be some movement due to this weekend's events, due to Canelo Alvarez effectively becoming a 3-division champion by knocking out WBO light heavyweight champion Sergey Kovalev. This must be reflected in the rank standings. This makes him a full-fledged 3-division champion, the same as Vasyl Lomachenko and the same as Terrence Crawford, with the tiebreaker being that Canelo Alvarez has effectively unseated more active, reigning world champions than either of the two. Canelo Alvarez has beaten 6 world champions to Terrence Crawford's 4 and 6 world champions to Vasyl Lomachenko's 3. Just as well, even though these guys have all been full-fledged champions in 3 weight classes, Canelo Alvarez effectively jumped 2 weight classes to do it. He didn't move up 1 division, he moved up from 2. His last fight before this was at 160 against Daniel Jacobs. He went from 160, beating a champion at 160, to beating a champion at 175. And I understand some of the anecdotes, some of the critiques that in many ways Canelo Alvarez beat the weakest link at 175, but better still, if it were easy, everybody would do it. Not only would everybody do it, everyone would succeed.
That ain't the case, is it?
That really ain't the case, is it? And that kind of an anecdote, that kind of a sentiment is likely coming from Canelo's detractors, you understand. Be they Golovkin fans or Lara fans or PBC shills that are trying to take shots at him because now he's in bed with DAZN, the competing platform. It could be any variety of guys, but essentially that kind of a sentiment is not coming from an impartial place. It's not coming from a place that's taking the facts as they are. That if it were easy, we'd see more guys doing it. But not only would we see more guys doing it, we would see them succeeding. I mean, look, I understand if there are people out there that feel that Golovkin got robbed in the first fight. I actually agree with that myself. I feel that he won the first fight. But better still, if moving up were easy, he would have done it by now. Yet Gennady Golovkin here today hasn't so much as moved to 168. Let alone 175, like Canelo did for this fight. So you gotta give the credit where the credit is due. You've got to give the redhead his just due. That him going up there and knocking out Sergey Kovalev. I didn't even have Canelo knocking him out. I had him winning on points, and he exceeded my expectations. Thus, he must be awarded the credit, the rank, as it were, for performing just such a feat. And here today, Canelo Alvarez advances to the number 2 spot on the Ring IQ pound for pound list for not only becoming a 3-division champion, the same as Vasyl Lomachenko, the same as Terence Crawford, but for having beaten more world champions, active reigning world champions overall, and defeating the 6th, not by going up 1 weight class, but by going up 2 weight classes in the process. This must be reflected, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, because if it's not reflected, if we don't display the facts as they are, the list itself loses all credibility. Then it's just a guy playing favorites, and that's not what the Ring IQ pound for pound list is. It has a set criteria that governs who goes where and why. The logic, as it were, it has to stick, it has to make sense, it has to count for something, okay? That moves Terence Crawford down to the number 3 spot through no fault of his own. Because I'm sure that Terence Crawford, if he had it his way, he'd be unifying titles in his very next fight with Errol Spence, who's the unified champion at 147 pounds. And that would be enough, you know, if the fight goes down sometime in the near future, though I'm not holding my breath. But if it does, that would catapult Terence Crawford back to that number 2 spot. You know, Vasyl Lomachenko, his situation is a little dicey because he's a franchise champion now via the WBC. He doesn't actually have a world title that the winner of Comey versus Lopez can win. Thus, for them, it's not even an undisputed title fight. So the situation has changed for Vasyl Lomachenko, and it creates a situation to where he may not move ahead of Terence Crawford, even if he does fight the winner of that fight, because he won't actually be an undisputed champion. He's not bringing a green belt that the winner of Comey versus Lopez can win. I mean, the premise for advancing on this list is matching and or surpassing what the fighter in front of you has done. And as it stands, Terence Crawford has been an undisputed champion. He has done that at 140 pounds, whereas for Vasyl Lomachenko, that doesn't seem to be the case. He's not bringing a green belt that someone else can win. You know, nobody called this Saturday's fight between Sergey and Canelo a unification match, and yet Canelo is a franchise champion the same way that Vasyl Lomachenko is, but no one considered this weekend's fight a unification fight, and that's because, well, that's what it wasn't. Canelo wasn't bringing a belt that Sergey could win, so the same is true in the case of Vasyl Lomachenko. If and when he squares off against the winner of Lopez versus Comey, he's not actually bringing a green belt that they can win, so in that way, it's not an undisputed title fight. And in that way, he's not actually matching or surpassing what Terence Crawford has done so far. Thus, defeating the winner of that fight won't be enough for Vasyl Lomachenko to move up into that number 3 spot. But there is a silver lining. I'll tell you what it's going to take. It's going to take for Vasyl Lomachenko to beat Devin Haney. That's right, a contest between them. Because even if Vasyl Lomachenko can't get his hands on Devin Haney's green belt due to the bureaucracy and the cockamamie rules via the WBC, he would still be effectively defeating the WBC champion. Devin Haney is the only guy with a version of the green belt that other fighters can win. That makes him the full-fledged WBC champion at 135 pounds. That's what the WBC has so decided. So, if Vasyl Lomachenko is to fight him at some point next year or the year after that, and he were to defeat him, well, that would count. That would count as Vasyl Lomachenko, at least figuratively, being an undisputed champion. This is why I said the WBC kind of fucked him over. They effectively are depriving him of the chance of seeing that dream come into fruition, of holding all those belts. That's what they've done. Now, I know what Vasyl Lomachenko's fans may be thinking to themselves right now. Well, hold on a second. Hold on. Wait a minute. Okay, Vasyl Lomachenko actually fought for that belt. Yeah, he did. He fought for that belt against Luke Campbell. But Luke Campbell was not the WBC champion in all the ways that Devin Haney is. Devin Haney is actually in possession of the belt. Thus, he must defend it. And by the time a Vasyl Lomachenko fight rolls around, Devin Haney might have legitimized his reign as a champion already. He's got a title defense coming up. So just imagine what could happen between now and the time that Vasyl Lomachenko and Devin lock horns. You're thinking to yourself that Devin Haney doesn't deserve to be a champion. You're thinking to yourself that he was handed a belt. But why was he handed a belt? I'll tell you why he was handed a belt. He was the mandatory challenger for Vasyl Lomachenko. He was ready, willing, and able to challenge what was then the WBC champion for his crown. He was willing to do it. But it was Vasyl Lomachenko's handlers, the people over there at Top Rank, who willingly set him on a path that resulted in him becoming a French fry champion. A champion with a belt that apparently nobody can win. So you can't blame Devin for that. You can't sell me the Devin was handed a belt. No, Vasyl Lomachenko was handed some kind of a designation that resulted in Devin being given a belt. And it wasn't Devin's fault. Devin wasn't trying to be Devin wasn't trying to be handed a belt. He was trying to fight Vasyl Lomachenko for his. That's what was really going on. So you can't even put that on Devin. At the end of the day, if Vasyl Lomachenko is to at least attempt to legitimize what could be, figuratively, him becoming an undisputed champion, it would have to be through fighting Devin Haney. You gotta use your heads, kids, and get it out of your ass. Okay, I know that there are a lot of Vasyl Lomachenko fanboys shaking their fists at the sky right now, mad at me, but I'm just sticking to the facts. Okay? Vasyl Lomachenko, in order for him to have a precedence to surpass the accomplishments of Terrence Crawford, well, beating the winner of Comey versus Lopez ain't gonna do it. All that's gonna do is match the number of world champions that they have fought. It would be 4-4, but the tiebreaker would be that Terrence Crawford has been undisputed, whereas Vasyl Lomachenko has not. And that fight, that won't make him undisputed. He's a French fry champion. I mean, any of you Vasyl Lomachenko fans out there, do you consider Canelo Alvarez a unified champion at 175? No, right? No, he's not in possession of any belt at that weight. Well, guess what? Vasyl Lomachenko's not actually in possession of the green belt at 135. It is what it is. The logic has to stick. So the most I can say is these are the rank standings. These are the updates. Canelo Alvarez effectively moving up 2 weight classes and knocking out Sergey Kovalev is enough to inch him past Vasyl Lomachenko and Terrence Crawford until those fighters add more accomplishments to their resume, because those accomplishments are what reflect their skill level and who they are and what they're capable of in the sport of boxing.